This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first, call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee with your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 an order. Additional terms apply.
Hello, mate.
Hello there, how you doing?
And welcome all to Book Corner with me, the Cabbie, and Andy from My Football Books. You're sounding much more clearer. You sound really muffled here earlier, so let's start again. What a month it's been, and it's been 4 weeks since part 1 of our new venture, Book Corner.
It flew by, hasn't it? Yes, and it's got colder as well in those well, even last week it's got colder as well. So all of a sudden, with the hour going back, etc. as well, it's got darker, colder. But the football season's really getting into gear now, of course, isn't it, as well? So as we get up to that Christmas period, which is suddenly coming up, so... But yeah, all good. Thank you very much. How are yourself?
Yeah, very well, thank you, Andy. And the Christmas period that's coming up means there's going to be some wonderful publications coming out because Christmas is the ideal time for football books and releases of football books. Let's just, if people didn't listen to the first episode, part 1, let's just rewind a little bit and briefly tell everybody about you and how you became myfootballbooks.com, the #1 football book company on the planet.
Thank you very much. So, it came about where, so it all started last year, as I suppose, as one of the I don't know if you said positives to come out of COVID, but I was furloughed with my company and suddenly found a bit more time on my hands, so I could do my favourite hobby, reading football books, and I was reading more and more, and then quickly, from a conversation with my wife, pretty much, started talking about why don't you recommend books to other people, and that's where the website kind of came from there. And My Football Books has kind of grew from there, really, to hopefully as a platform, which is very much the overriding thing for me was to provide something where it would potentially help people when they're looking for a new football book, want to know about the new releases, what's coming soon, books about their favourite players, team, etc. So and it's really evolved from there, yeah. So what almost a year, just over a year or so in now. And it's been great feedback I've had, and I get lots of messages, which is great as well, from even football writers, which is amazing. And I see some people that are sharing some tweets as well, which is always nice. The likes of Gary Lineker shared a tweet from himself last week.
So was that a Leicester book?
It wasn't one of his books. It was about it's Match of the Day.
Yes, okay, yeah.
Classic one of his books coming up to Christmas, actually. I think it's the top 10 of everything, or top 10 debates. Yeah. So, he retweeted that, and so did Alan Shearer as well. So it's just little things like that just make you think, oh, that's great, isn't it? So, so My Football Books is very much that. So it's to share, recommended books for like-minded people who have a love of football, really. And I love reading as well.
And you can subscribe to myfootballbooks.com. So, guys, go and check out the website. It's an absolutely fantastic website that you've built yourself. And also, you've got some merch on there, haven't you? Your mugs and your book, what they call where you bookmarks, where you stick in the book. Your bookmark is still on page 111 of Grandad, What Was Football Like in the 70s? Because anybody that knows me knows that I am the worst reader in the world. I think it stems from my time in school. All we done in English was argue about Birmingham City and Aston Villa. So I blame my villain friends for that.
Excellent. No, yeah, got so there's a bookmark and I do a mug as well. So I do the photos that I share on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, etc. I purposely always put the mug there, kind of thing. So and it was just for myself really. And then someone asked me about, do you actually sell mugs? And that's where it really started. So I now you can buy them if you wish as well. So a perfect Christmas gift coming up. So there you go. There's a plug. And a bookmark to go with it. So when you're in your book, you're on what page 111, you don't want to get lost, and you've got a bookmark instead of creasing it. So, because obviously you can crease a page, don't you? But then you're ruining the quality, aren't you, Gabbie?
Absolutely. And the quality of your merch is top draw because you design the icons yourself. You've pretty much done everything yourself, and it is absolute pucker. It's quality.
Thank you.
You did talk about reading books this month. What books have you actually read this month? I've said I haven't actually read a page, although I've got Terry Curran, because Book Corner has grown out of the Book Corner that we do on the Curran View. And I've got Terry Curran buying books and reading football books as well now.
Yeah, excellent. I heard him say, actually, about a book, it's about Welsh football, Druid.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what books have I read this? So I've read, there's a couple I've added actually on my newsletter this month. 71, 72, Football's Great Season.
Have you read it?
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. If you're a fan of the 70s, which I think you are, it's a must-read. Absolutely. And just, he's subtitled The Football's Great Season, and I think he's done justice to it. I think the answer is yes, in terms of when you just think of it, without ruining it for people, if anyone doesn't know what the season it was, you only need to look at the league table at the end of it. In terms of, I think there's 1 point. I'm just trying to remind myself now. 1 point between the top four, and of course it was Brian Clough's Derby County's first one, but it took them to win the league that season. When it was 2 points for a win, of course. I think I've got it here. Derby of 58, Leeds 57. Liverpool 57, Manchester City 57. So literally 1 point between them all. Yeah. So, brilliant read, really great read. And I must admit, actually, the forward really kicks it off as well. It's by John Motson.
Yes, it is, yeah.
And he really brings it to life in terms of how great that is, because it was the starting point for his career. Because if you remember, he commentated on that famous Ronnie Radford goal.
Yeah, he did, yeah.
For Hereford. So, so he does the forward of it. But brilliant book, that one. And similarly, that kind of era as well, like the European Cup, The Undisputed by Stephen Scragg.
Yep.
So read that as well this month. Great read. Great trilogy of books he's done, Stephen Scragg, on all he did the one on the European Cup Winners' Cup, then the UEFA Cup, and now the European Cup. So when it was properly Champions Europe, not Champions League as it is now, Gabbie.
Absolutely. So, a wonderful trilogy that Stephen's got. And you can listen to Stephen on their regular podcast, These Football Times, with Stuart Horsfield and Gary Thacker. Really is a very, very enjoyable listen. Going back to the 1971-72 book, Football's Greatest Season, I'm loving the cover. You've got Rodney Marsh. I don't know what Rodney Marsh is. If you had one of them blurb things, I don't know what would come out of Rodney's mouth there, because he looks very confused as Rodders. You got Kevin Keegan in a tank top with Shanks. Shanks is smiling there, and so they've obviously had a conversation. Looks like Colin Todd, Toddy in the top left-hand corner. Brian Clough with that unassuming smirk on Clough's face. Reevy looking really in thought there, Don Reevy. And I've got to say, Don Reevy, the biography by Christopher Evans, published by Bloomsbury, is out now. And that is a tremendous read. Again, it's another book that I may read in probably not months, but years to come. But I do love to buy these books for reference, because I just get so excited by looking at a football book, and I'm spoiled. Well, what one do I read first? And then I make podcasts, and I have made a podcast with Daniel Abraham, who wrote this wonderful book.
Oh, brilliant!
You can get it on our SRBMedia pages, or we have got a chapter of my life one on Twitter and on Facebook as well, and I've rejigged it now, Book Corner. So if you check us out, and let's have a reference to your social media while we're talking about that, how people can link up with you.
Yeah, so on Twitter, it's quite straightforward. My Football Books. I passed the 5,000 follower mark as well, so I'm not sure if that's an achievement or not. But so it was quite. So it's hit that mark. And on Facebook, I should know this off the top of my head, Gabbie. I'm pretty sure it's My Football Books as well on there.
It is,
off the top of my head. Yeah. So, and I'm also on Instagram for the younger generation. So, it seems to be the younger generation use Instagram as well. So I'm on there. So they're free platforms. I have thought about doing some things on YouTube as well, but we'll see further down the line maybe.
Yeah, I've never had great success on YouTube or Insta, to be fair. It seems to be for a younger audience, and the robots pick up what the robots want to pick up. But again, on this cover, Billy Bremner picked up the FA Cup, and Peter Dobin's picking up the League Cup as well. And I love the picture. As soon as you turn the pages over, there's Billy and Alan dancing, you could say, orchestrating, both getting up off the floor when they've probably had a punch up. But Billy Bremner's got a smile on his face, and you can tell by the way that the picture's caught Bawley that Bawley's smiling as well.
No, absolutely.
And both wearing Adidas boots. Both wearing Adidas boots.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, the great, not like your pink ones and all kind of colours you get nowadays, So, but I love the picture actually on the insides of the back as well. So it's all the muddy pitches, isn't it? So it's when, it's pretty much when football money didn't rule the game, etc. And it's just,
Well, I think it's quite appropriate because it's a Manchester derby there, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And Alex Stepney, it looks as though the ball's going to hit the bar and go in. I don't know the score, but it's obviously the 71-72 season. And both teams, we have to say, in at that time were littered with fantastic players. Although United were just coming down, and I suppose you could argue City's best days were behind them, but both cracking sides littered with fantastic players. So, guys, 1971-72, football's greatest season by Daniel Abrahams, forward by John Motson. And I had the great pleasure of doing a podcast with Pat Howard, who played in that game. And as the ball whistled past Pat's ear, he thought, hang on, that's got half a chance of going in. And sure enough, Ronnie Radford's strike did hit the back of the net. And it was goal of the season as well, wasn't it, that season in 71-72 season? And Motti only got that gig because somebody was ill.
That's it, that's it. I think he mentions that in his forward about that story as well. It's all by chance, isn't it, how you get these opportunities. So, but just an iconic goal, isn't it? When you've got the players running on the pitch, etc. And he's got his... Yeah, it was a classic muddy pitch as well, wasn't it, against Newcastle? Yeah, Newcastle on that day. So you see them all running on the pitch and the Parkers on and what have you. So the must-have jacket at the time. Again, the cold afternoons.
Yeah, the 70s, the halcyon days, the golden age of football, in my opinion. That's my, I wouldn't say period of expertise because I'm no expert, but it's my period of indulgence. I love that period. And it brings me nicely to a book I just want to bring up. Yeah. I've just done a podcast with Kenny Hibbett. And we talked about on another project that I do, Game of My Life, when we take a trip down memory lane and revisit a iconic moment or game of the 70s. Probably late 60s, the 70s, and maybe even the early 80s. And Kenny recalls scoring that wonderful goal at Burnham Park on the 14th of May 1977 that ultimately promoted Nottingham Forest. And as a consequence, Bolton Wanderers didn't go up that season, but they did the season after. And Kenny's book, Seasons of My Life with Tim Nash and forward by John Richards. I mean, what a player John Richards was as well. And what a team Wolverhampton Wanderers were back in the 70s.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he was. I know he was nominated in, because I know I've got a few friends, Wolverhampton fans. He was nominated in the Wolverhampton Wanderers Hall of Fame, I remember, about 10 years back. Kenny Hibbert, wasn't he? So I think he had over 500 appearances.
Derek Parkins.
Derek
Parkins made the most appearances for Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Right.
And Kenny is second. They both arrived in 1968. And Bill McGarry spent a few quid when he took over from Ronnie Allen and spent it very wisely. And they reaped the benefits, got to the European Cup, the UEFA Cup, which was the first all-English European final tie in 1972. Yeah, they played Spurs. Martin Chivers had a large say in what went on in the two legs there, and the cup ultimately ended up at White Hart Lane and not the Molineux. And of course, in 1974, beat Manchester City in the League Cup, and Mike Bailey proudly paraded the FA Cup that day around Wembley. But great manager, Bill McGarry. Great times at Wolverhampton. And Kenny was telling me what a wonderful coach and then manager Sammy Chung was. Is there a football book about Bill McGarry? Is he a manager that's got a book out?
Ooh, it doesn't ring a bell, but it'd be an interesting read, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So it doesn't ring a bell, but you find these some books that there's a lot of books that come out in a certain sort of periods, certainly around this time of year as well. So I'm sure it may well be out there somewhere. So it's not really something worth digging out, and probably you give me a bit of a task, Gabbie, to see if there is one. So I'll have a look.
And I'm guessing there wouldn't be, probably, if Bill McGarry wrote it, it wouldn't be that thick. Because he wasn't a man of many words, Kenny told me. In fact, he hardly spoke to the players. But, I'm sure his upbringing, his grounding, and his legacy that he left in football is an indelible mark, and certainly in my lifetime, Wolverhampton Wanderers' greatest manager. Yeah,
absolutely. Oh, what a team they were at the time, weren't they? Absolutely. Yeah. They're obviously doing well now back in the Premier League, aren't they, as well? But, it's fabulous. It's fabulous. And Molineux in those days, now kind of thing, it was a fantastic ground as well, isn't it?
That atmosphere,
you've got the... Oh, yeah.
Can't spell it.
Where do you put the U? Is it the X? And I know you mean. It's one of them, isn't it?
It is one of them words that I really do struggle to spell, Molineux. But it was a fortress in the 70s. And I did talk about Book Corner that we do on the Current View, and our podcast has grown out of that. And you do give a recommendation, and you do more than that as well, because on this day, usually... centres around one of your books that you do, because you don't just put books out, you put books of now, books of then, and players or managers that have birthdays or sadly passed, you put them out as a tribute. For instance, Ian Wright, it was his birthday the other day, and you put it out for Wrighty. Yeah. And Ron Saunders as well. And The Odd Man Out, the fascinating story of Ron Saunders' reign at Aston Villa by Graham Denton. Yeah, that was one of the books that you recommended this month. Also, Football's 50 Most Important Moments by Ben Jones and Gareth Taylor.
Yeah, fantastic,
The Outsider History of the Goalkeeper by Jonathan Wilson. And The Magical Magyars, The Rise and Fall of the World's Once Greatest Football Teams by David Bailey. So let's start there in Hungary. And we will talk about that great book by David Bailey. And it actually is one of the books that I've read.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant book by Dave Bailey, So, what a team to write about as well. Yeah. So, there's also a book, I think you'll also talk about, the name's heard long ago, by Jonathan Wilson. But, both excellent books. And what a team. It was in the 1930s, wasn't it? It was the golden era when Hungary first came about. And I know it's going to be one of the books you'll talk about as well, as the influence of Jimmy Hogan on these teams around that time. But they're great stories, and what a team really. It culminated very much around that match, they classed it as the match of the century, when Hungary, of course, beat England at the Wembley in 1953. Was it 6-3 as well?
Yeah, they beat us 6-3, and then the English press, being as arrogant as they always have been, pretty much said it was a fluke. So the Hungarians invited England over to Budapest in 1954, and they beat us 7-1. To prove that it was no fluke, Hungarian football of the 50s was alive and kicking. In fact, they got to the final of the 1954 World Cup, and they got beat by West Germany. They beat West Germany 8-3 in a pool game, because they had pools those days, didn't they?
Yeah,
and,
they did.
Puskas was injured during the tournament, come back for the final, had a goal disallowed, and it's called The Miracle of Bern. There's actually a film in German about that game where West Germany beat Hungary 3-2. There's and it's not an allegation; it is an actual fact that the Germans had something at half time, but apparently it wasn't uncommon. Quite a few teams did do that, but an
ejection and sometimes, wasn't it?
Yeah. Whether it was performance enhancing, we don't know. Nothing is proven. We don't know whether Puskas' goal should have stood, whether it was offside or not, because I believe there was a blackout for a few seconds while Puskas made contact, and then the TV cameras come back on, and you watch the ball go over the line. So you can call it what you will. I will say it was a conspiracy. I believe that Hungary should have won the 1954 World Cup final, and I don't think it was the miracle of Bern. I think it was a cheat in Bern.
Well, but the Hungary were 2-0 up, wasn't they, as well at that time? So, and that's the fact that they'd thrashed them, not just beaten, they'd thrashed them in the group match, didn't they? 8-3.
Germany did make a few changes, to be fair, to them in that first game. But, Hungary did smash them 8-3. and Hungary of the 50s, anybody that does know the football, were different class, it's fair to say, absolutely different class, should have been world champions. They were Olympic champions. And I was listening to a podcast with Dominic Bliss, David Bolsheva, and Jonathan Wilson the other day, talking about the magical Magyars. They were also, I'm going to bring another book into play here as well, because we're going to stay on that theme for some time. Bela Gutman, greatest comeback from genocide to football glory. And Jonathan Wilson was on that podcast as well. 3 absolute gems of journalism that really know their stuff. Right, fantastic pieces of work. And it's an education just listening to those fellas as well.
Absolutely. Well, Jonathan Wilson, when that book, The Names Heard Long Ago, it was 15 years in the making, that book, from really? Pretty much the start of the year. So he did books in between during that. So, it's you can tell from the way it's written as well, as he obviously really put heart and soul into the book as well. So, but it was, he's a classic football historian anyway. And then you've got the likes of David Bolter as well. But that particular book, The Names Heard Long Ago, it actually starts off in the first chapter where he goes and visits the grave of the...
It does, yeah.
Yeah, of the manager whose name's going to escape me at the moment. That's it, that's it. Yeah, that's it. So, what great writers, aren't they? So, Bela Gutman, though, what a story that is. What a story. So... in terms of, I always think of Bela Gutman now when I think about when he was he was the Holocaust survivor, wasn't he? So, and then went on, to be such a great manager at Benfica. And then he famously, when they won the European Cup, he put a curse. I'm sure you've heard the story, but he put a curse on, basically after he won the European Cup, he asked the board of directors for let's say a slight increase, nothing dramatic from what we gather, in terms of his wages, and they rejected it. So he put a curse on the club for 100 years, which has stayed true to this day. And there's actually even a great story in 1990. European Cup final when Benfica played AC Milan. I think on the eve of the game it was Eusebio.
Yep.
He actually visited Bella Gutman's grave, asking for forgiveness or one way or another. It didn't work, so because AC Milan won 1-0. But it's just one of those. I love little stories about that, and it just really links it back to what a story and what a individual Bella Gutman was.
And that's
a fantastic book.
It was Bella that bought Eusebio to Benfica, wasn't it? Because he got contacts from Brazil. I mean, Bella Gutman was one of these coaches that played ever. I didn't realise, because he was over there in America in the 20s, and in the first World Cup of 1930, America finished third. I didn't realise that the Americans played, would have been professional football in those days. I didn't realise there was a league in the 20s in America, but there was, and it was only the Wall Street crash really that stopped the Americans playing football. And before Bella went to manage Upestoza, he was in America, but his love for football took him back over to Hungary and managed them in 1939 to the title. And then, of course, it all broke out. The Nazi invasion and the occupation in Hungary come later than what it did in several other countries. But Bella and Erbstein, Egri Erno Erbstein, I mean, it is an absolute mouthful, but those two were very connected, those Hungarian coaches, and Bella went on, both survived the Holocaust, and Bella took Benfica. You're right. In the book, actually, I was listening to David talk, and he dismisses that Bella actually put a curse on Benfica. He does say something, but he does dismiss that it was a curse that he put on. But it's a great story. We all love a curse story.
Yeah, we all love the story as well. Yeah.
And I have ordered from the Blizzard Dominic Bliss's book about Erbstein. Because I think that those two boys, they were pretty much interned. They were going from camp to camp. Ultimately, their destination was Auschwitz, and they decided to do a bunk, do a runner, and both got free. And when you look at what they did after the war, because Erbstein was a coach at El Grande Torino before the war, but then when he come back as manager, and he took them to unbelievable heights. And I would say, to this day, El Grande Torino are the greatest football team ever to play football anywhere on earth.
Yeah, I don't think many people will argue with that. I think a lot of people agree with that as well. So, I mean, it's just so much connection, is there, to their two stories.
Yeah.
So, but just going back to that book, the David book, it's just, he's one of these great writers that can tell a great story. But in terms of, I was just thinking about when you were saying about when he was literally hiding, like in the attic near Budapest, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
there's literally thousands. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and obviously then escaped that. His father, and I think his sister, and his wider family were all murdered as well, and it's just incredible. But yeah, those two, their story's kind of interlinked, isn't it?
And also,
when they moved on.
Yeah, we cannot.
But then, got the disaster, haven't you, if I remember, of the Torino team?
Yeah, that was on the 4th of May, 1949. Torino and the tragedy of Superga, when they were playing against, got no idea it was Benfica. I've got no idea it was Benfica. They played in, it was a testimonial.
They were coming home from Lisbon. They were coming home from Lisbon. It was Benfica.
Because the first team after the tragedy was River Plate, and there's been that love between River Plate and Torino ever since. But they were coming back. They were allowed to go and play there because they'd almost won the Italian Championship. It was almost sewn up. And on the way back, they they decided to go to another airport. I think they changed whether they got some stuff that they shouldn't have, excess baggage, cigarettes, alcohol, etc. We don't really know, but it was foggy that night as they were flying back, and they hit the Basilica on the mountains. Didn't they? The wing just clipped it, and they all died on that mountain top. And 10 players famously played for Italy in that Torino side. They were the most unbelievable football team ever, captained by the great Valentino Mazzola, whose son Sandro was one of the captain. Was it? No, I think Facchetti was the captain, but he was certainly the playmaker of the El Grande Interside that conquered Europe in the 60s. Yeah,
absolutely. Wow. It's just a tragic story again, isn't it?
Yeah,
when I think about I don't know if you recall, it was the Brazilian team. I think it was Japaquese. The triumph and tragedy of them. It was on the eve of their biggest game in their career.
Yeah,
or their biggest game in their history, wasn't it? And they crashed. Didn't they? I think if I remember rightly, the plane ran out of fuel. There's actually a book called Triumph and Tragedy by Stephen Bell around that team, which is it's an uplifting story and a sad story to tell at the same time. It just reminds me, similar to the the Gran Torino story. And in fact that particular one, because they obviously the team they were playing against, Nacional, I think it was, they forfeited, and the Japanese won were given the cup, as a mark of respect, really.
Mm-hmm.
But there's similarities in terms of those stories. It's tragic, but in their own ways, uplifting as well when you think of what they achieved.
Yeah, football is so interwoven, it's so interlinked. And if you take the Italian, the tragedy of Superga, you can link it back to Hungary, because Laszlo Kubala should have been on that flight, and it was only his wife coming over to Italy. Because when people talk about the magnificent Magyars, and Puskas is the first person I'm guessing that most people will recall, and Hidakuti that scored the hat-trick, and Bosic, and so on and so forth. But Kubala had already defected to the West, and in 1949 he'd made his way over there to Italy, and he was going to play for Torino. But it was just the fact that his wife had arrived, and he couldn't play, so he didn't make that flight. And as a consequence, he carried on and was I wouldn't say it was just Kubala that done it on his own, but he certainly transformed Barcelona with his teammates, and they outgrew the stadium, and that's why they went to the Camp Nou, because it wasn't big enough, and that was largely down to Laszlo Kubala. And there is a reference to Ron Atkinson there, because Mike Summerby always used to call Ron Atkinson Kubala. I don't know why, but that's what. Yeah. I was talking about Kubala, and Mike Summerby always used to call. There's Kubala there. Whether that was true or not, we don't know. Ron does spin a great yarn.
I never realised until I was hearing your weekly with Terry Curran that Ron Atkinson's from Liverpool originally.
Yeah, he was born in Liverpool.
Never knew that.
Yeah, born in Liverpool.
Sorry to change the story, but...
Only there for 3 days. He said someone tried to nick me pram, so we moved to Birmingham. But but Ron had family up there that had a dairy by Goodison Park, and he spent the 1966 World Cup up there watching Hungary and Portugal and North Korea and Brazil. Well, North Korea wasn't in that pool. Can't remember if they played that game against Portugal at Goodison. They may have, because that was they both got out of their groups. but in it was Hungary, Brazil, Portugal, and Bulgaria was the four that was in that group that played up there in Goodison. But Ron speaks very highly of that Hungarian 66 team. He said they were a terrific side.
They were absolutely tremendous team. They were a tour de force, weren't they? Let's say in terms of, and they brought it. Well, it was the start because I'll link it back to Jimmy Hogan kind of thing. Because he was one of the let's say the early fathers of that passing, possession type football, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
And he worked with the likes of the coach Sebes. Didn't he? Part of when Hungary beat England 6-3, and also Jimmy Hogan was also linked with Hugo Mezel, who was the coach that coached Austria's Wonder Team as well.
He certainly was, because Jimmy was interned while he was in. He'd played for Bolton. I think he played for Burnley and he played at Bolton, and they went on a tour to Holland, and they played a side whose their name escapes me, and they smashed them 10-1. And he vowed that one day he'd come back and teach them how to play.
Dorbex?
Yeah, I think it was,
Yeah.
He vowed one day he'd come back and teach them how to play football, and true to his word, Jimmy did. So he then, I think it was about 1908, something like that. He went back and showed them how to play football. And he managed Holland to their first defeat of Germany, West Germany. They beat them 1-0. He only managed Holland for one game, I believe, and that was the game against Germany. But Jimmy was over there in Hungary because he was coaching at MTK. And
that's it, Budapest.
Yeah. While he was over there, he was working, asking the British Embassy what was going on, because obviously in 1914, the outbreak of the First World War, and they said, no, it's fine, you'll be okay. Well, he wasn't, and what happened? He got interned, and then I think there was certainly a connection because he'd worked with the Austrian team and Hugo Meisel, and Meisel was a good friend, and I do believe that Meisel had some pull in getting Jimmy Hogan out into a safe house, and they were great friends, they were great compatriots as well, and they were both great coaches, and you're right, there's a wonderful book, The Wonder Team, The Rise and Fall of Austria's Wonder Team, by Joe Araf and Hugo Meisel there in the bowler hat. But
that's it.
But Meisel, what he done for that Austrian team was phenomenal, and Jimmy was also working with Hugo on the team there in Austria. Jimmy also worked in he went back to Holland. He also taught at the School of Dresden, and Helmut Schön was one of the pupils that was listening to Jimmy Hogan while he was going around Germany giving his talks. And when he passed away in 1974, Jimmy,
he did, yeah.
And that was the year that the World Cup was competed between Holland and West Germany. And Sorry,
God, yeah. Sorry, Gabbie.
No, I'm saying, and the secretary of the West German Federation wrote to Jimmy's son and said, "We didn't know anything about football until your dad taught us how to play."
Well, that's it, yeah.
And that
he was pretty much the father, wasn't he, of starting this, his legacy. He's got a direct lineage from many of the modern football tactics, really. I even remember, actually, it was the coach, Gustav Sebes. There's a famous quote where he said, "We played football as Jimmy Hogan taught us. Yeah. When football history is told, his name should be written in gold letters." I remember that quote, but you think in terms of where he went from your Meisel's Austria team, and it led to Rinus Michel. I always could pronounce it wrong. Total Football.
Yeah,
absolutely. Then it's Johan Cruyff, Barcelona.
Yeah.
Then Pep Guardiola, etc. Yeah. It's all that lineage, isn't it? And that all started from him. So he's one of those almost forgotten men, isn't he? But forgotten by some, but until you read into the story, and I think that's the beauty of books, isn't it, as well? So the books bring stories back to life.
Absolutely,
really.
and there's a great book, Prophet or Traitor, the Jimmy Hogan story, written by Norman Fox, and bringing it back to Ron. Jimmy was the coach of the intermediate team, the third team, that Ron Atkinson was playing for.
Right.
Yeah, Ron was when the Magyars were prominent. Ron was at Wolverhampton Wanderers, and then he moved to Aston Villa. Eric Houghton was the manager of Aston Villa, and Jimmy was one of the coaches. So when Jimmy was the manager of Aston Villa, Eric Houghton was one of the players. So that was the link with Eric Houghton and Jimmy Hogan from like the 30s, then move it forward into the 50s. But Ron was there, and he said Jimmy Hogan, what a fantastic guy he was, and he was teaching the kids how to play football. He said, in fact, there was many players that didn't want to go and play for the reserves because they wanted to play in Jimmy's team, which was the third team. But when you moved up to the reserves, the coach there of the reserve team, Ron told me, he said, forget what Tap's told you. Give the ball some altitude. So there were varying philosophies on how the game should be played. But Jimmy was all about skill, about ball work, and he educated Europe how to play football. But unfortunately, he never had the opportunity, really, to educate us in this country. I think he managed Fulham, and he definitely managed Villa for a season.
Yeah, it reminds me of, there's another book called Mister by Rory Smith, where it says about the men that taught the world how to beat England at their own game. And that's just Jimmy Hogan, isn't it? Because it was almost ridiculed, wasn't it, at times?
He was,
his style, his passing style, etc. No, we don't do it like that. We do it like this. It's hard grit and... it's blown out of the water, isn't it? So,
the attitude of the English coaches in those days was starve the players of the football during the week, and on a Saturday they'll go and hunt it and they'll want it. Where Jimmy's philosophy was, it's all about the ball, and we need to work with the ball and learn how to control the ball and pass the ball, and he was all about ball work and working with the ball, which was alien to what most of the coaching was in this country in Jimmy Hogan's day.
But what is incredible from around that time as well, though, he had the likes of Fred Pantland, who was born in Wolverhampton, and that was back in 1920s. That was, and he famously was in the same in the First World War in a camp with Steve Bloomer as well. England and Derby legend. Great book actually there by. He'll come back to me about the Rubelline, the FA. So it was a tournament that was set up in that war camp. But Fred Pantland, he was another one that's. He went abroad. He won the Copa del Rey with Atletico Bilbao, Atletico Madrid, and again Steve Bloomer. He went on to win the Copa del Rey with another Spanish team around about that time. So I mean, it's just like the Hogans, and you think of these other people. There were so many that went abroad, and took the game elsewhere, and took it away from England really, because they saw a different way of playing.
It's quite incredible, really, isn't it?
It is.
When you think about the English coaches and Scottish coaches as well.
Scotland, definitely.
That went to Europe. And George who was the fella? George Rayner. George Rayner, of course, got to the 1958 World Cup final for Sweden when they played against Brazil, and Pelé taught him a new one, didn't he? They beat him 5-2 in the final. But George Rayner wasn't particularly recognised in this country. In fact, George Rayner, when Alan Hudson, their family, went to Skegness on holiday, Alan and his brother John went to play football at Skegness at Butlins. Dad said, got to my sons here, can you just, play football? Because that's what you did, didn't you? You'd have golf, crazy golf and different things at Butlins, and then you'd have someone that would have the kids and show them how to play football, and the mum and dad would go and have a few beers and go and play bingo, whatever. Well, it was George Rayner that taught Alan and John. Well, didn't teach him, but was playing football with them. And it was only many years after that Alan discovered that it was George Rayner. And from winning the World Cup, getting to the World Cup final in 58, the only job he really got in England was managing Skegness and coaching in Butlins.
It's credible, isn't it? No, I remember it. I seem to remember a story. Again, it's linking it back to the 6-3 game. I didn't Rayner, because I think he met Walter Winterbottom. I think it was the England manager at the time. And I think he tried to give him some advice. And I don't think Winterbottom wanted to know anything about it, so I didn't follow his advice. And he ended up, obviously England lost in that game. Yeah. In 53.
The English wasn't very good at taking advice.
No, it was. So, he did end up at Skegness Town. I remember reading that.
Yeah.
Was it Skegness Town?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah. He managed Skegness and he was coaching at Butlins.
Incredible, isn't it?
I mean, what a common name from,
from the World Cup.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Brazil in the final of the World Cup to Skegness.
Yes. So it's a bit like Southgate. Well, even though he didn't go, suddenly they ended up, at Tamworth. No offence against Tamworth, if anyone's listening from Tamworth, but so it's just quite a change, isn't it?
And we wonder why we don't win anything. It is quite incredible. What books are coming out this month, or what's come out last month? Let's have a recap from last month. And what have you got on your newsletter for this month?
Well, like I said, just mentioned last month, so you had 71-72 season, so great. And then the Undisputed Champions Euro. You had another one that came out, which was called The Immortals. It's the Arrigo Sacchi and about his team when he was at AC Milan for, I think he was there for 4 years. But again, they won the European Cup twice. It was on the back of, we had the famous three Dutch duo of Marco van Basten, Ruud Gullit, and Frank Rijkaard.
Yeah, great player
as well. And great set of players. And obviously, on the back of when they won the European Championships in '88, they all followed him. Then they went to Milan, didn't they? And so that's about that. That's about that story. And what a cracking team they were. So they actually, I remember they won the '89 European Cup, Steaua Bucharest. I think they beat them 4-0. I think they beat Real Madrid 6-1 in the semi-final over 2 legs, etc. So quite a team. But that was one of the books from last month. There was a number of, I think around about this time of year, you do get a lot of biographies out. And I think you've already mentioned lots of Don Revie. Ron Greenwood as well had a book, a biography come out as well. And there's some ones, Olivia Giroux. I
heard him on TalkSport.
Yeah,
a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I did as well. Yeah, Patrice Evra. He's quite a character, isn't he? He had a book come out. He is bonkers.
He's bonkers, isn't he, Evra?
There's a clip of him actually on Twitter when he's launched the book, and I think he's with his wife. And to launch his book is a strange clip of him and his wife eating a red hot pepper. So I'm not sure what on earth that had to do with launching his book, but he did it anyway. So it's just got to explain the character of him. And Julian Joachim also had a book come out, which I've got it on my list of books to read. So if you remember him, I remember him more from his days at Leicester City. Yeah. It was like lightning.
Julian Joachim. Was good player, JJ. Yeah. And at Villa, played at Villa. He's well remembered at Villa.
Yeah, there was quite a few biographies, autobiographies that came out. Another one, Totti as well, Totti, the Roma player. So
the Emperor.
The Emperor. It's called The Gladiator, actually, his book.
Okay.
So quite a apt kind of title. Lots of other books that came out last month. Turf Wars, if you've ever seen those books, are a trilogy, and it's based on certain areas. The one that's latest one's around the West Midlands.
Do you
so
think
it's football
that's
history.
an appropriate title? Because it suggests football violence, but it isn't, is it? It's about...
Yeah, I can see what you mean. Yeah, it does a little bit, doesn't it, when you look at it? Yeah, I know what you mean. I think he's just followed that title. It doesn't mean that.
No.
But
because his latest one is the Midlands, isn't it? I saw that and I thought, Turf Wars, what's all that about? But it's more, the rivalry and how the teams stand in the specific areas that the author's covering. Because
that's it.
Again, ordinarily, if you don't know that, you would think Turf Wars, that's football violence.
Yeah, it's interesting, that is. I must admit, when you think about I suppose one of the things when you're writing a book, I remember reading actually one of the writers, and he was talking about one of the main things is obviously getting the title right of your book, getting your cover right as well. You can have a fantastic cover in a book, and Pitch Publishing, they're, but for me, well, if not the best, certainly one of the best in terms of the graphic designers they get in. Well, you just mentioned the 71, 72. You look at that, what a brilliant cover that is.
That's probably
the best
one of the best covers I've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Along with there was one that came out last month, and I'm up for called The Beautiful History. It's by the same guys that did The Beautiful Badge, which are brilliant books if you're looking for something for Christmas for one of your relatives. So if you get that title right, the cover right, and obviously good content, of course, if you need. You get all that. There was also another book that came out. I think you mentioned it on one of your weekly podcasts with Terry. Is the early years of the FA Cup.
Yes,
as well.
Yeah,
going back to the Victorian times.
Yeah, the British Army. What was the? I mean, without giving the story away, have you read the book? What was the link with the British Army?
I haven't actually read it. No, not yet. But it's to do with because it's obviously it's the book. The idea is because it's the 150th anniversary, isn't it? The FA Cup this season, and it goes back to because the first set of the matches were played in 1871. The Engineers obviously reached a final at the Kennington Oval. And I don't know the full story, if I'm honest, because I've not read it, but it's somehow linked to how the army produced or got involved with the teams at that time. But I don't know the ins and outs yet, Gabbie.
James
looks a great story.
Bancroft has written it. When you're talking about covers, got to mention All Crazy Now, English Football and Football in the 1970s. By David Tossell. And, I mean, again, a book I haven't read, but I will read. I mean, David is a great writer. He's wrote some fantastic books, wonderful titles. And it's like...
Big chunk of a book, that one as well, isn't it? All Crazy Now.
500 in it. And Kevin and Billy fighting on the front, and the colours. And it's just everything that you would want from a 70s book, isn't it, that one? All Crazy Now. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
What titles are coming out for Christmas? Have we got any that you know that's coming out? What's on your shopping list? What's Santa going to bring you for this Christmas?
Because November this month is now, you've still got a lot of books coming out, then it quietens off. December tends to be a quieter month, really, so you're getting your books in now. But for the ones that's coming up for this month, I've picked out a few in my newsletter, just a bit of a mixture, really. There's a book that's coming out which really sounds an interesting story. It's called Be Good, Love Brian. Yep. It's by a guy called Greg Broomfield, and it's about growing up with Brian Clough.
Yep.
So it's a basic story about him and his brother, but we're taken under the wings, basically, of Brian Clough. And I read an article. I shared it actually on my Twitter page, and I think I've shared it on Facebook as well. There was an article that was written about the book. He did an interview with someone at The Guardian, which gave a bit of an insight, and it basically talks about just giving a different side to what Brian Clough was. Again, I think most people do know he had his spiky kind of side, but he was a great manager, wasn't he? Everyone knows that. But he was his warmth as well, and I think that's what this book is about. Is telling about how he. In these young lads, he saw a bit of like when he was young, because I think they're from the same area up in the northeast where originally Clough is from. And that's it, Middlesbrough. And so this is written about. It sounds a remarkable story because it's something I'd never heard of. Where basically, these couple of young lads, Brian Clough took him in, and he gave them work. I think they worked with Brian's two sons, Simon and Nigel. I think they had a shop or something nearby. So it sounds a fascinating story. It's one of those. There's a linkage to football, but again, it's just a linkage to understanding Brian Clough. I think any book maybe I'm being biased, but any book that's linked to Brian Clough is always going to be an interesting read, isn't it, Gabbie?
The ultimate socialist, wasn't he, Clough?
Yeah.
If you got a run to the litter, Clough would have the runs.
Yeah.
He was the archetype working class man that done good and never forgot his roots and was always grounded. I mean, there's many a story of Forest players or Derby players that, young kids and they're, not been away from home before, and Christmas Day he'd have them round there eating Christmas dinner and turkey with them. And Clough, from stories that I hear of Brian Howard Clough, one of the most generous persons ever. Yeah. I remember Alan Clark telling me about one of the journalists, I forget the journalist's name, but Clough had I don't know if it was the Mirror or the Sun. I can't remember what paper Clough had a feature in. Yeah. And the guy that wrote it for him, he was round his house one day, or they was having food and drink, and he just says to him, "How much you got left on your mortgage?" They were just a general talk, and he told Brian what it was. And then come back in, here's a cheque paid off. And it was a very, very generous. And it's those thlike that you don't hear of Brian Clough. Yeah. I remember David Langan telling me a story when he was at Derby and one of the apprentices. He'd phoned down to the boot room, cup of tea, young man. And it was like, get it yourself, put the phone down. Yeah. Did he just say that? I'll try it again. Cup of tea, young man, get it yourself. And he put the phone down, so he'd phone him up again. And he'd go, "Young man, do you know who this is?" He says, "Yeah, get it your fucking self," and put the phone down. And then they legged it. They legged it and Clough had gone down. And I said to Langy, "Do you reckon Brian knew who it was?" He said, "Yeah, he knew who it was." Yeah. But that was Clough. Just a one-off. And we will never, ever, ever see the likes of Brian Clough again, sadly. No, man was a genius. Absolutely. I love a Clough story, and I love a Clough book.
Well, that's what I'm looking forward to. So, that comes out. I think it's out next week, so watch out for that one. So, it should be a very interesting one, slightly with obviously a football related, but also a bit of a human element as well, which is always a good mixture for a story, isn't it, or a book? You've got a good character and a story as well. And then I picked something slightly differently. There's a book coming out, Panini football stickers. Okay, so everyone, whatever age you might be, there's a book coming out by Greg Lansdowne. He did a previous book as well called Stuck on You, which is kind of linked as well to stickers. So it's a book of celebration of football stickers, but it's obviously it's not come out yet. So, but it will be very much a trip journey through memorabilia, etc. And it's bringing that to life. So. I just whenever you think football stickers, I don't know if they still do them nowadays, Gabbie. I don't know. Do they?
I think they do, but I don't think the kids are like what we used to, because we'd save up our pocket money, and then we'd be in the playground, got in, swap you that, and you go, Trevor Francis, I'll give you 50 for Trevor Francis. No, my mate said he'd give me 100, I'll give you 100 for Trevor, and they would always hold back the big stars in the area, wouldn't they?
They would,
And it wasn't just Panini. There was a book before Panini come out, and I went to Jim McCalliog's book launch at Bilston Town, and there was a lad that bought the book that was like, I think it was probably 71, 72 season, before Panini started bringing their stuff out. And I'm like, oh my God, I remember that. I remember as a kid, I remember going round and, because you put the glue on the top, because the panini, they stuck it on, didn't they? But with this one, you stuck it, you got the dotted line, so you put the glue in that bit there, and it would flip up, so all the flip, and there was a little bit about the player on the back, and I remember as a kid, collecting them and then around in the playground, got and it just brings back vivid memories, and
it does, and that's why I picked that out really as a book. I think it's just I can just straight away. It'll be one of these books. It's different, isn't it, as opposed to when you're reading a 500-page book. This is one that you sit and look at the page. You probably just sit and look at the page for probably 10, 15 minutes, looking at all the images. It's just that heady mix of football history, wonderful nostalgia, and all it all brings back all the memories, etc. So, and the Panini stickers was literally a global phenomenon, really, at the time as well, when you think back to the popularity of it, and the bartering you used to have on the playground.
Absolutely.
To get the one you wanted.
I remember not long ago on your myfootballbooks.com and your Facebook and your Twitter, there was a book about Scotland in the 1970s. Do you know if anyone's ever written a book about England in the 1970s? Because I've got a Facebook page, England 1970s. We played 100 games in the 1970s. I'd love someone to write a book. I'd love to write the book about it, but I'm not clever enough.
There you go. You just need to just join in with a writer, Gabbie. So there's plenty of writers out there. You never know.
I think it'd be a great book.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
England's 100 games of the 70s, and that's pretty much my Facebook page title. Started off, of course, in January 1970, when Johan Cruyff come to Wembley as part of the Dutch team, and we drew 0-0. Bobby Charlton had a goal disallowed, as did Ian Storey-Moore, which brings us back to 71-72, because Cloughie reckoned he'd signed him for Derby. Moved across, just over the Trent, from Nottingham Forest to Derby County. A young man, me seeing Storey-Moore, we just signed him, but the Forest board wouldn't sanction it, so it didn't go through. And Storey-Moore, of course, moved to Manchester United. Yeah,
absolutely. Linking it back to those, because you said about the 70s England team, there was a book, I remember, the 1982 England World Cup team. It was written by a guy called Gary Jordan, called Out of the Shadows.
Okay,
you think about the team there, that, the story of that team that got so close. They're a great team, really, but never really got anywhere with it in the 1982. And linking it to that, he's bringing out a book in November, Gary Jordan himself, which is called Show Me the Way to Plough Lane. It's the remarkable story of Wimbledon FC's return home. So it's just a classic. It's the way I think everyone knows in terms of when you think of Wimbledon and what they achieved in the 80s. I think we mentioned on our last podcast where they went from that start of that century, start of the decade, to then obviously winning the FA Cup in 88. But this book is then obviously the obviously changed then with MK Dons, and everyone knows the story there. And then the way they rose up again, so that comes out this month. So if it's anything like his last book, which I'm sure it will be, it'll be another good read from Gary Jordan. So that's one to pick out. Another ones for this month is a few more class footballers. Glenn Hoddle,
yes,
his autobiography. Yeah, so playmaker.
Yeah.
So it's almost, I must admit, Glenn Hoddle, it's a little dawned on me. For some reason, I thought he had an autobiography out already. It's one of these. Why did I think till now? Yes, I know it.
Yeah, Glenn's got another book out. They do. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Yes, I don't think I've ever read it. So, no, he's out. And then Jerry Armstrong, another one that's coming out. My Story, My Journey. I know Terry mentioned it on his on the cast. Tony Curry, he's got a book coming out through Vertical Editions, another great publisher. The Imperfect 10 is the title of that book. The Man Behind the Magic. Paul Mariner.
Yep.
Great front cover on there. it's similar actually to Glenn Hoddle, the front cover, when England, the Admiral, the classic, the Admiral England top. The late, obviously, Paul Mariner, sadly passed away in July, was it, I think, of this year now. So his book comes out. And a few others as well. I'll just give a shout out to a couple of books that's obviously come my way, actually. They've come out this month. There's one called Red Letters. Which is written, it's really sounds a really interesting story. It's about two guys, two fervent Liverpool FC supporters who correspond with each other during the season when they won the league, and obviously how it finished in that dramatic way. There's obviously the lockdown for COVID, etc. It seems a really interesting book. The guy, one of the co-authors of the book, is a guy called Neil Atkinson, who he does the Anfield Rap, which is an extremely popular Twitter page and blog, etc. It's a really interesting book. So it's basically two fans on the opposite sides of the world, basically corresponding with each other for the whole season. So it sounds a really quite an interesting book. So I'm looking forward to reading that. So and it's a big chunk of a book as well. So and another shout out to another one called The Lives of Stanley B, which is a fictional book, but it's written by a guy called Matt Guy, and I've read his other books before, which are non-fictional, which are really good. So looking forward to that. So fiction. When I think about fiction, I'm normally the non-fiction is me. The books I kind of read, but there's the occasional fiction books that they're really good out there as well. So just a shout out to them as well. So in fact, Gary Thacker, you mentioned earlier at these Football Times, he brought out his first ever fiction book last year, and it was a really, really good read, actually.
Part 2, the follow-up is coming out soon, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. It is. Yeah, no, it's really good. He clearly knows his football, and the story of his first one, it obviously comes through as well.
Beautiful bridesmaids dressed in orange.
Oh, yes.
What
absolutely.
a knowledge. I've done a podcast with Gary. In fact, he said, do you want to chat about novel that's coming out? So I've got to get hold of Gary, and I'll do another podcast with
He is, absolutely. And then just a couple of them I'll mention. You've got Billy Liddell, the former Liverpool icon. Yeah, Liddell at 100. Written by Peter, I must get this right, Peter Kenny Jones.
Okay.
So, he's got a book about him celebrating the life of the Liverpool and Scotland legend, Billy Liddell.
Scored the goal in 1954 when Birmingham City beat Liverpool 9-1.
Right, okay. Didn't know that, Yeah, so...
In fact, I think it was Bob Paisley that had there's a connection with Bob Paisley, bringing Billy Liddell to Liverpool. And also Matt Busby, because Busby was there at the time as well. So that would be interesting. Yeah,
he remains the oldest goal scorer in Liverpool's history and their fourth highest scorer of all time, Billy Liddell. So, that comes out on the 8th, which is Monday, as we're talking. Monday the 8th.
I shall buy that. I love things that I don't know much about. I know them, but I don't know much about them. There's a book that we featured in Book Corner on the 26th of October. Eddie Hapgood by Lynn Hapgood. It's the extraordinary story of the young unknown boy from Bristol who went on to captain England and Arsenal and was national hero in the dark days of the 30s. Now, I'd heard of Hapgood, but I didn't know much about him. But what a fantastic read that looks like. And in terms of Imperfect 10, I did contact Vertical Editions on their Facebook or Twitter page. I can't remember what. And I said, I've got to take it to task. Tony Curry was the perfect 10, not the imperfect 10. And the reply was, you must read the book, sir. It's all going to be... It will all unfold when you've read the book. So the title seems to be a twist. And the book is going to be a fantastic read because Tony Curry is one of my favourite players.
Yeah, Sheffield United, wasn't he?
Legend.
So,
Watford,
absolutely.
Sheffield, QPR, Leeds United. Tony Curry, he couldn't make that. I mean, it would have been, for me, in the 70s, Hudson, Ball and Curry. That would have been my midfield trio.
Yeah, no, it should be a good read, that. So the guy that Vertical Editions called Danny Hall, who's the who runs that publishing company, he's a big Sheffield United fan.
They do a lot of Sheffield-based books. In fact, Terry Curran's first book was Vertical Editions.
Oh, okay, yeah. The Maverick.
Yeah, that one with John Brindley, who wrote Terry's second book as well. Yeah, Vertical Editions. They do quite a lot of Sheffield-based books. But there's just so many great publishers. You know, you mentioned Pitch Publishing. There's also Conkers. They do some great instantium books. They bring out some great books, don't they?
Brilliant. Their book they brought out as one of my favourites from last year was Football's Black Pioneers. The stories of the first black players to represent the 92 league clubs. But great timing as well, obviously, with the Kick Race and Out campaign, etc. Yeah. But it's a brilliant book, really well put together as well. Nice and simple in the way it's done. It's the 92 league clubs, so it's done in...
it's a heavy book as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's done in, it's done in alphabetical order. You know, if you want to go straight to your club, you know, to find out who was the first black player that played for you, etc. But some just great stories in there. So and some great stories as well. But it also touches on you know, some of the issues that they had. You know, some of the black players and the problems that they faced.
Absolutely. Written by Bill Hearn and David Gleave, and I had the pleasure of Bill Hearn's company to cut a podcast talking about Football's Black Pioneers. What a lovely fella. What a lovely book. And it is a heavy book. I'm holding it now in my right hand. You've got the Saputio players, which surprisingly, a lot of the Saputio players there are white, aren't they? On the front of the book.
Actually.
Yeah, I know.
Unless it's because the front one is... black? Yes, I wonder if that's the reason why then. Yeah.
I wish I'd have had the book before I interviewed Bill, because that would have been my first question. But you're right, the story of the first black players to represent the 92 league clubs, and the foreword by the great Viv Anderson. And a lovely little picture of Laurie, West Bromwich Albion, Laurie Cunningham, turned down by Arsenal. Degrees. Yeah, at Arsenal. He was at Arsenal as a kid, Laurie. Didn't quite cut it at Arsenal, went to Orient, and West Bromwich Albion, Big Ron brought him in at the Albion. Went off and played, obviously, for Real Madrid. But I remember Ron going to Wembley and watching Laurie and said, Laurie, why do you play like that? You don't play like that for me. And he said, I was told to play that way. And Ron said Laurie could run in snow and he wouldn't leave any prints. What a player Laurie Cunningham was. Yeah, and while we're talking about black history, The Straggling Life, Andrew Watson, the story of the world's first black international footballer by
Scottish.
Lou Walker. LLEW. And it's a wonderful book. I love these books that are like that. And when I say like that, the 1971-72 season, you get the book and then they've got that ridge, haven't they, in there? And this book is exactly the same. But if you've got the ridge to that book, it's just in the middle of the LL. And I didn't know if it was Blue Walker, but it's LLEW, Lou Walker. And a wonderful picture of Andrew on the front. And they didn't realise that this fella existed in the 1800s. Playing in Scotland as a black football player. Yeah,
no, it's a credible story. And again, he literally is a pioneer, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He captained Scotland.
Yeah, he did.
So he was the first. I hope I get this right. I think he was the first international black footballer. If I'm correct, I can't remember if that's something. But he was assumed the role of a Scotch professor. I remember. So he taught these English peers. The science of the more dynamic, like passing style of football. And I know he was part of a team that they beat England 6-1. I think I was on his debut, I think 1881. And again, there was a famous one when they won 5-1, because there's actually a mural still to this day. There's a mural of the original site of Hampden Park.
Okay.
It's on the side of a train track. If you Google it, you'll find it. Yeah. And there's a picture of him, and it's got Scotland 5, England 1, Hampden Bowling Club, and he's on a picture on there. So, but no, cracking story there again, and one of those lost stories, which is again, obviously I'm going to be biased talking about books, but it's only books like things like that. You'd never know, would you?
No, absolutely.
Until someone puts a pen to paper and brings it to life. So, great story.
Yeah, A Straggling Life is the incredible story of the world's first black international footballer, the son of a Scottish plantation owner and a free woman of colour. Andrew Watson was provided for by his wealthy father. He received a first-class public school education, but rejected university to become a footballer in Glasgow. I mean, you read the first paragraph of the synopsis there and you think, what a wonderful book, I've got to read that. I come across it, there was an article that I was trawling through YouTube, having a look at one or two things, and it was Mark Walters that was talking about it, because Mark played for Glasgow Rangers, obviously, and it was on the Scottish TV programme of some sort. It might have even been the news in Scotland, but it was a clip from a few years ago. Because, again, Mark Walters, me being from Birmingham, Mark played for Aston Villa and was the year above me at school. Not that we went to the same school, but we're of a similar school age. So my eyes thought, oh, blimey, there's Mark Walters doing that. Andrew Watson, who was he? So I immediately went and bought the book. But,
great story. In fact, there was an article recently, I was thinking about it, only a few weeks back. I think it was on the BBC. So, it's obviously...
they regurgitate them, and it is Black History Month, isn't it? So anything like that at the moment, the BBC will pick up upon that. But, great story by Lou Walker. And I just love the picture there. It's a drawing of Andrew Watson. It really is a riveted. I mean, I'm looking at it. Andrew's just looking back at me. And that's the great thing with art, and it is a great thing with books, that it does bring the characters to life. And I think that book cover is fantastic.
It does. I'm pretty sure that's Pitch Publishing as well, unless you tell me wrongly. Differently, sorry.
Yep, it's Pitch Publishing. You're absolutely spot on. And let's give at Pitch Publishing on Twitter. So guys, if you want to look at all the wonderful publications Pitch Publishing come out with, it's at Pitch Publishing. There's just brilliant books. It's all our football history brought back to life. Sky going to do it.
Yeah, I'll tell you another book I'd like to mention. Just you make me think as well, just bringing things back to life. There's a book I'd like to give a shout out. It's called Highbury Memories. It's a book that's been given sent to myself, and it's a lovely little book edited by a guy called Tony McDonald, and it's one of these. I just love old grounds like Highbury. I know you've got the lovely new grounds, haven't you? Like Tottenham's new stadium is great, etc. But I don't know. They just haven't got, even like the Emirates Stadium, it's not got the character of a Highbury. I'm not an Arsenal fan, but for me, Highbury has so much character, and it comes out in this book.
Halls.
That's it, and it's the changing room. It's a picture. There's got a lot of pictures in this book, which brings it to life as well. You look at the changing rooms. I'm looking at it now. You think of the likes of Thierry Henry, etc., in these changing rooms, and they're classic old changing rooms as well. So the kind of changing rooms that anyone would have got changed in, really. So, but I just love these books about the old grounds. When I think of the best grounds for me still now are the likes of the Villa Park, Goodison Park, Everton, even if it's a place like Crystal Palace, Sellers Park, they've got character, great atmosphere as well, haven't they? Etc. And you miss some of the old grounds like that. It's a bit like baseball grounds, Roker Park, Upton Park, Ayrton Park. They're all parks. Main Road is another one as well. They've all got great character. So just a shout out to that book as well, called Highbury Memories.
Is there a book about the famous grounds of English football then and now? Because, the baseball ground, that did have It did have a link to America and baseball, didn't it? If my memory serves me right, I'm not quite sure how, but I think when it was being built with the idea of baseball being the game, and I thought it was going to take off, and I think that's why they called it the baseball ground. But there's lots of grounds that are called something. I mean, obviously, Main Road might be because it's on a main road. And like St Andrews. I don't really know why Birmingham City was called St Andrews, to be quite truthful. But I mean, Villa Park was called Villa Park because it literally is Villa and it was the park. It was the lower grounds, of course, before Villa Park. But there's such a lot of history in football grounds, and I just wondered if anybody had done a book. I know 442.
There's a few. Yeah,
442 had done a really lovely feature on the top 100 grounds in British football. Not the famous grounds, but some really obscure grounds, and I thought that was nice.
Yeah, I think that was based on a book that came out last year, actually. Yeah, British football's greatest grounds. It was 100 must-see football venues by a guy called Mike Bailey, and I've got it. It's a cracking book, and it came out last year, around about this time last year. Actually, it's got the likes of Villa Park in there, Craven Cottage City Grounds, amongst others that you won't have heard of really. But it's just the characters of some of the grounds in there, like the Shea as well, Halifax Town.
Yep.
So, yes, I think that's the book you're referring to. It came out,
And again,
last year.
with Villa Park, you could have a book about Villa Park. I mean, some of the great games played at Villa Park, whether it be an England international game, whether it be an FA Cup semi-final game, because back in the olden days we had semi-finals at Villa Park. I think Villa hosted over 50 FA Cup semi-finals. And then
they were great days, weren't they? They were great days, and I think that's the magic of the FA Cup as well. And I know we talked about that last month as well, but the semi-finals, they've been at Wembley. It's just nowhere near quite. It's not as the same kind of spectacle. I remember as an away fan going to the likes of Villa Park, etc. It's a cracking day out, isn't it? For you coming up from London, and they've come down from Manchester, and you've ended up in Birmingham, etc. So. Great days.
Yeah,
I'm sure there is a book on Villa Park. I know there's definitely one on the baseball grounds. You can find it on my website. So because on the website I do categorise recommended books by various clubs, and it's in the Derby County category on my website. But the baseball ground, gone but not forgotten. Which tells you a little bit about the history there by a guy called Andy Ellis.
And there's also a farewell to bowling, isn't there, that come out not long ago?
Correct. Yes. I think that's, was it earlier this year, I think it was?
I believe so, there'll be a farewell to Goodison, because I think Everton are moving out of Goodison. Liverpool are building, aren't they, on Anfield? Good.
Yeah.
Because I really dislike it when clubs move to different grounds. I mean, Villa, they're looking at extending Villa Park as well, and Manchester United, of course, are still at Old Trafford. I just think it's just steeped in football history, and if you can develop it, please stay at your ground, and that's where the home of the fans is there.
That's what your memories, isn't it? It's your religious church, isn't it?
Yeah, it
is your church you go to.
Yeah.
And if you're going to move your church to a nice shiny, bowl, and there's nothing against I don't know, the King Power, Pride Park, and Southampton's grounds. They're nice looking buildings, In fact, Manchester City, when you think of the Etihad, fabulous stadium, but Main Road, wow, that had some character. So you didn't stay around for long if you're an away fan. I remember that. So
I think you stayed around at many football grounds in the 70s. If you were an away fan, would you?
You did.
I don't know where there was more violence in the 70s, on the terraces or on the pitch.
Absolutely. Great time.
So what other books have you got for us, Andy, that you want to give a shout out to?
The hybrid memories I mentioned. just to shout out to, there was one that came out, last month as well. Was it last month? It was a couple of months back. It's called The Hard Yards.
Yes.
A guy called Nigel Tassel.
Yeah.
A great writer. I loved his first book, if you've ever seen it. It's about the non-league football called The Bottom Corner. Really, really good book. And this one's based on the Championship. So I can't recall if I mentioned this last month, but yeah, it's one of my recommended reads I put in this month's newsletter. So great story, just telling you about the Championship. And just, yeah, it really is, as many people know, it says in the subtitle, season in the Championship is the football's toughest league. And and in terms of, you look at the attendances just in midweek this week, it's a well-attended league as well, isn't it? You've got some big clubs in that league, and anyone could beat anyone on a given day. So I think did Preston beat Bournemouth this week? I'm just trying to recall.
Not sure. I hope not, because I backed Bournemouth to win the league. I know Fulham absolutely spanked Blackburn 7-0 at Ewood Park, which was a tremendous result, and both Bournemouth and Fulham are looking good.
I'm afraid to tell you, Preston did beat Bournemouth 2-1. Yes, really? I've just checked. They did, yeah. But it's just, again, a classic example, isn't it? So, anyone from top to bottom, that's Championship, really. And that comes out in this book, kind of thing, The Hard Yards. So I'd recommend that. And a couple of others I'll recommend as well, that I recommended. One's called The Lost Shankly Boy, which is about George Scott. It's a cracking, it's written in conjunction with a guy called Jeff Golding, who's a prominent writer on Liverpool football. He's wrote a number of books, but yeah, The Lost Shankly Boy, it's an enthralling tale of the triumph over adversity. So it tells you about when he was rubbing shoulders basically with Bill Shankly in the early days at Anfield. It's just a cracking story, brilliant story in terms of where his life goes from there. And it's just, players like that, there's a few, your Glenn Hoddles, really about their stories, and these kind of players that you don't know so much about. And when you read them, it just, really brings it to life from the character. And one other shout I'll give out is Forgotten Nations, which is a book I read it's a while back now, by Chris Dealey, and it's about those clubs which are not well known, basically, or nations are not well known, that don't compete in the FIFA ranks, and they compete under. It's called a competition called CNIFA.
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah,
CNIFA, yeah.
Talk Sport, they do it, don't they? They cover it.
They do.
CNIFA,
that's it. Yeah, so it's the Confederation of Independent Football Associations, and that book, called Forgotten Nations. The guy Chris Dealey, he's clearly got a great sense of humour, because it comes out. It's a funny book as well. There's some cracking stories in there of some of the nations. In fact, if I just looked at the contents page, it covers off some teams called like the Tibet. You got the Tibet. You got the Chagos Islands. It's just great stories. So it's another book I'd recommend. That there.
Got
something a bit
team in there.
Yes, there is actually.
Did Yorkshire have a team in there? I know there's some real bizarre ones that
That's it. It is, It's got its own chapter, So, Yorkshire. They're in Catalonia. That's, I'll come back to it. Is it Panini? So,
there's some really obscure ones in, and I thought, they've actually applied and they've got like country status. What's happening in the world? Yeah. But that's what football fans do, don't they?
Oh, it's just a love of football. Anything like books like that, it's just clearly written by a football fan, and it's wrote about people that just love football, and that's it. And it just, it's a great little story. Give that a shout out as well.
I was listening to boys on the podcast, and it was about writing football books, and look, we just focus on something that we like. Find a niche part of your market. Jonathan Wilson said, and try and be as good as what you can be. And I think that's the whole the whole thing about football, whether it be writing about Subbuteo or writing about a tournament like that or a cup, or there's just that many different angles, that many different football books, and the more the quirky ones, the more it kind of like tickles your fancy, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would always suggest to people, I know you'd like to pick about the 70s, etc., but sometimes when I pick a book and I think, what on earth is this about? And quite often they're the books that, that sticks in your memory now. Yeah. Really, it's something that I just never even imagined, never even thought about, or never even knew about, and that's probably a classic example of that. The Andrew Watson story as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you're referring to.
And a couple of books I want to give a mention to as well. Barton's Army by Colin Abbott.
Oh, yes,
Colin wrote some fantastic books on Aston Villa. I mean, he's a font of knowledge. If I want to know anything on Aston Villa, like, for instance, probably 2, 3, 4 months ago, I'd looked at something and I've gone, Neil Rioch's name isn't Neil. And so I thought, why do they call him Neil Rioch when his name ain't Neil? So I phoned up Colin and I asked him, and I can't remember what the answer was now. I don't think Neil Rioch's wife knew what the answer was. I'm not convinced that Neil did either. And he's got another brother that's called, he's got Bruce, obviously, who's his brother. And another brother, but he's called by a name that isn't his name as well. So he must run in the Rioch family, but Colin does know absolutely. He's forgotten more than most people know about Aston Villa. He's an absolute top lad. And then Roy Cavanagh and Carl Abbott's book, Manchester United of the 70s. They pair of guys have wrote loads of books together. Roy Cavanagh, I've done a number of podcasts with Roy, and again, a font of knowledge about Manchester United. And although it was not the greatest of periods for Manchester United, in many ways it was a great period for United, because they got relegated to the second division in 1974. But didn't they come back with a force? And you could argue that that was the turning circle of United. They'd actually bottomed, and Tommy Docherty started to rebuild, and then Dave Sexton and Ron Atkinson. There's another book, K Sarah, written by Warren Barton.
Wayne Barton,
not Warren. I said that to Woody. I said, Warren Barton's writing a book on who was it? George Best. It was the book that he wrote by George Best.
Yeah, True Genius. True Genius. Yeah. I read that 3 months back.
What's he writing a book about George for? I said, I'm sorry. It's Wayne Barton, not Warren Barton. And he did phone up Alan and had a little bit of input to True Genius for George Best. But again, George playing there in the 70s for Manchester United, as did Jim McCalliog, and I think that's going to be an absolutely fantastic read. It's one of those coffee table books that you turn over, and Legends Publishing have done that. They publish some fantastic books. In fact, a number of Collins books are there by David Lane of Legends Publishing, so absolutely fantastic.
I read one of their books recently, actually, Legends Publishing. It's an Aston Villa one. It's the first volume, the first 150 years.
It's incredible, isn't it?
It's a proper coffee table, what I would call a coffee table book. It is properly one of them. So not just for Villa fans. I'm not a Villa fan, but it's a cracking book. Some of the history in there is incredible. Some of the stories I didn't realise in there as well. There's one of the stories I remember reading it is the guy that actually stole the original FA Cup.
Yeah,
and it was stolen from a shop window in Birmingham, wasn't it?
That's Sparkill, I think.
That's it. I never realised that. So I think I vaguely knew the story, but I didn't realise it was in Birmingham.
Yeah, well, we couldn't win it, so we nicked what Villa do.
Yeah. So, great stuff.
But no, he's currently writing the second part of that, and I'm going to be doing a project going forward with Cole, looking at Aston Villa through the years, which is a project that we started just before my birthday last November, And I was waiting for a Chinese to arrive, and I'd give Colin a call. We were cutting the podcast together, and his knowledge and his passion for Aston Villa was so great. I said, come on, we're going to have to do something together, and, you know, we're going to have to look at Villa in more depth, because one of the founder members of the Football League, and of course William McGregor, is the father of the game, who come down from Scotland, and that's why Villa have the Lion. It was Glasgow Rangers Lion that he brought to Aston Villa, and a great statue, outside Villa Park of William McGregor. The ground is steeped in history. I mean, I'm a Birmingham City fan, but going to the game, you come off the train. I went with my stepson and his little brother on Saturday to watch the West Ham game, and the first thing you see is the Holt pub, and then you see Aston Villa's Villa Park, and you know, if you like football, you're a general football fan, you cannot be in awe of that fantastic ground.
Yeah, that Holt end is something else, isn't it? I know it's quite fairly old now, isn't it? In terms of now it's been all seated double tier.
Yeah,
but it's still quite it's dominating in the area, isn't it? When just even in the ground, it's quite dominating when you're looking across if you're in the way end.
Well, I have been in the way end a few times as a Birmingham City fan, and I've looked at Holt end and I thought, blimey, you know. But sitting in the Holt end now, you think, wow, you know, it's almost like a kind of home now. Things change and fortunes change in football. I was taken down St Andrews with my dad as a kid. I'm taken down Villa Park now as a granddad by my stepson.
Excellent. I'll put it
football. Till next time, can we just say thank you all for listening? And Andy, it's been an absolute pleasure talking for about an hour and a half about football books, and we will reconvene next month just before Christmas to talk about some of the wonderful publications that are going to be out on the shelves and on myfootballbooks.com for people to purchase and read. What are your next books that you're going to be reading this month? Because I'm guessing I'm still going to be on page 111 of Grandad and What Was Football Like in the 70s by Richard Crook. Sorry, Richard. Yeah,
well, I've got the one I mentioned, it's called Red Letters. I'll be reading that shortly. So that's the one where the two Liverpool fans write to each other. And then I've got another one after that, but it's quite a big book. It's called Floodlights and Touchlines. It's about the history of spectator sports. So it touches on other sports as well as football. But it's written by a guy called Rob Steen, and it's published by Bloomsbury. And it's quite an old book. And this is the great thing about Twitter as well. And the great thing I've been doing in my football books is I've seen other people recommending books to me, and this has been recommended to me by someone who I know. I've read his recommendations before, so I've bought it and I'll be reading that. And it's another like All Crazy Now chunk of a book. It's 500 odd pages, so it'll keep me busy for November. So, but that'll be the one after that. But it's basically to do a history with spectator sport, I will tell you more perhaps next month once I've finished it.
Now, Rob, he's the guy that wrote the Mavericks, isn't he?
He is. Sorry, yes, absolutely, yes, the same guy, yeah. So again, when I think of a book, you know, if you've read one of his other books, you've got a good. It's a good idea that his other books are going to be good as well. So
I just look at the author and think, I like the books he's written. Not that I've read any of them, but I really like the books he's written. And I like to listen to them on a podcast as well. So till next time, happy reading.
Yes, I'll see you as we head up to Christmas.
Absolutely.
Okay. All the best, everyone.
Cheers, thank you. Till next time.
Cheers, Gabbie. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye.